everyone, and welcome to your first slice of Shepard's pie. My name is Richard Kirkham. In addition to being the current Shepard of the large association of movie blogs and its podcast, the Lambcast, I'm one of the biggest 007 fans you're likely to meet. Now, regular listeners to the Lambcast will have heard this before, but any of you here for the first time, let me give you a brief background on my love for James Bond. I was 8 years old when I saw my first James Bond film. My older brother took me to a double feature release of Dr. No and Goldfinger. While they were my first Bond movies, they were not my real introduction to 007. See, I had discovered a trove of paperbacks with intriguing covers and exotic names, and I wanted to read them. But they were not mine, and they were probably a little too much for me when I was 6 years old. I did, however, learn more about James Bond from bubblegum cards that came from the Goldfinger movie 2 years before I actually saw the movie. Once the films came into my life, I was hooked. That was in 1966, and I've devoured all of the Ian Fleming novels and Eon-based films since. As we go on this journey together, I'll tell you some of the personal stories and impressions I had about the films and the books, but one thing at a time. For the next 2 years, my plan is to share a video essay on each of the films on the 007th of each month. The videos will be narrated looks at the events of the era, characters in the films, plot lines, and production notes. And for those films that are based on a specific book, you'll get some comparisons between the two media. Now, naturally, we're starting off with Dr. No, the first James Bond adventure to hit the big screen. Most of you who care about 007 will know that there was a TV version of Casino Royale a few years earlier, but it's not part of our trip through the theatrical exploits of the world's greatest gentleman spy. Dr. No was released in Great Britain in October of 1962. But it did not immigrate to the United States until several months later in 1963. The book Dr. No was chosen strategically as the first in the film series because it had a simple plot and location shooting could take place in a specific area with less need for sets and elaborate set pieces. That obviously changes over time as the films become almost a travelogue for audiences to visit multiple exotic locations in each adventure. The film is based on the sixth book in Ian Fleming's series, and when we get to the book talk, there'll be some fun references to earlier books that would obviously not make any sense in the first movie. The closest the film comes to discussing 007's previous assignments comes in the scene where forces him to replace his Beretta because it jammed on him in his last assignment, and as M says, the 00 gives him a license to kill, not to be killed. The Walther PPK becomes his weapon for the next several films. The movie opens with the assassination of the Secret Service chief in Jamaica and his assistant. Their disappearance is the cause for 007 to investigate. Jamaica has actually gained its independence from Great Britain almost simultaneously with the release of this film, so the system of government bureaucracy that the film establishes will vanish very quickly, and the British influence will diminish substantially. The film represents, therefore, an historical transition point in the post-war British foreign policy. Now, much has been written about the first appearance of James Bond on screen. There were many actors and amateurs considered for the role, but Sean Connery was cast as the consensus choice by producers Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli. It's been widely reported that Connery was a little rough around the edges, and that director Terence Young took him under his wing and helped him dapper up as a cool, urbane, bon vivant gentleman. Director Terence Young is also credited with creating the foundations of the screen Bond. The humor and devil-may-care attitude of Bond is largely attributable to choices that Young made. He believed that if the story came across as a lark, the sex and violence would be more acceptable and censors would be less likely to object to what might be seen as coarse or offensive. The perceived misogyny of 007 is really a director's defense mechanism to authorities rather than the chauvinistic stereotype that so many of today's audiences want to classify the character in. Another historical note is the plot of Dr. No to interfere with the launches of rockets from Cape Canaveral. Now, this was a secondary objective of the character in the book and was really a future goal, not yet part of Dr. No's empire. In the film, however, the screenwriters took advantage of several NASA failures to make this a key element of the plot, tying the highly publicized space program with the character of James Bond. In a moment of foresight, the screenwriters make the criminal organization of Spectre, the special executive for counterintelligence, terrorism, revenge, and extortion, the culprit for the plan. Spectre was created by Fleming for the novel Thunderball, which came out just about the same time that this film was being made. The producers wanted to avoid political controversies, so they shied away from making the Russian intelligence operation known as SMERSH from being the bad guys, and that made subsequent films much more flexible for plot motivations. As a fan of movie promotional materials, particularly posters, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the work of Mitchell Hooks on the poster for Dr. No. He was an illustrator well known for the art covers of pulp thrillers. The designer of the 007 pistol logo is Joe Carroll, who died last year at the age of 103. He designed the pistol grip image spontaneously and as a letterhead logo, and it's been used for all James Bond-related images in the time since. Another iconic element of the Bond franchise is the theme for 007. There's often been controversy about it, but Monty Norman is its creator, and John Barry did the arrangement. I'm not enough of a music expert to be able to define all the elements that Barry used to enhance Norman's theme, however. There have been lawsuits over the issue, and Barry, in spite of claims that he ghosted the theme, had to ultimately concede that the theme was written by Norman. Taking nothing away from Norman, who had a very successful career, the subsequent work of John Barry suggests that a large degree of the success of the theme as a musical legacy belongs to the arrangement. Now let's turn to the novel that the film is based on and explore some of the differences. In the novel series, this was the adventure that immediately follows From Russia with Love. Bond is recovering from the poison kick of Rosa Klebb. Fleming's intention seems to have been to kill off his character after From Russia with Love, but financial exigencies dictated a resurrection of our hero. M sends Bond on what he thinks is almost a therapeutic vacation mission to the Caribbean. Both he and 007 seem to resent that the mission is happening at all. In the book, Bond is sent in on this mission in large part because of a bird. The Rosetta Spoonbill is a large bird similar to the flamingo, and Dr. No's guano operation has disrupted a breeding ground on the island that he mostly owns, but which has a legacy preserved that the Audubon Society of America controls to ensure that the species thrives. The MI6 chief in Jamaica investigates the suspicious death of 2 reserve attendants and a follow-up team's suspicious airplane crash. And this draws the attention of Dr. No, and he's eliminated. Yes, in the novel, Dr. No's business is bird shit, used as fertilizer, and he's just an obnoxious neighbor who uses lethal means to solve his disputes. This is a far cry from having the CIA asking for assistance in investigating radar interference in rocket launches. Felix Leiter, as Bond's CIA counterpart, is included in the film, but he was not in the novel, although he was present in Bond's earlier case in Jamaica in the novel Live and Let Die. Strangeways was also a character in the earlier novel, but the connection with Bond is not mentioned at all in the film. Another character in the film that was in the original book is the charter boat captain Quarrel, who worked with Strangways sometimes. Quarrel was also in the novel Live and Let Die. He trained 007 to make a dangerous underwater crossing to investigate the gold treasure smuggling of Mr. Big. In the film, he's introduced as a new character that Bond does not know and that he is originally suspicious of. The character of Professor Dent does not appear in the novel at all, since there was no radioactive materials in the original plot. The 3 blind assassins, however, do appear in the film and in the book. The legacy of the characters in Fleming's novels, though, might be a little problematic as written. They're described as Chigros, an amalgam of Chinese and Negro races, certainly a term that would be disparaging if used today. Fleming's novels are written from the perspective of a privileged Englishman in post-war times. The slang term is probably not seen as offensive, but the descriptive characteristics of Dr. No's host of minions would certainly seem to stereotype the race in a negative manner. No reference appears to them in the film, but the characters are depicted on screen as fitting the ethnicity that Fleming used in the book. There are a few other minor differences between the book and the film, but the biggest ones remaining are Bond's escape from captivity and the ultimate demise of Dr. No himself. In the novel, the escape through the ventilation system was really part of a planned obstacle course that Dr. No used to observe his victims and assess their resilience. The water flooding and change in temperatures, which are both in the film, are included, and in the ventilation system was a deliberate act to stress out the victim, who was frequently observed by Dr. No or one of his subordinates. There was also an enclosure of tarantula spiders that Bond would have to break through and crush to proceed. Finally, Bond would plunge down a vertical cylinder and splash into a barricaded bay where a giant squid was waiting to take 007 down. Instead of boiling on radioactive cooling water, Dr. No is buried in a pile of bird poop. Visually, it would not have been as interesting, and it would certainly not fit with the storyline that the film had developed. The budget for the film was $1 million, and that was stretched thin. The UK office of United Artists relinquished an extra $100,000 to create the climax of the film with the explosion of Dr. No's lair. Ken Adams, the production designer, had less than £15,000 to work with. The control room gets a lot of bang for its buck, but the most memorable element was actually the ceiling grill shadow in the Stark room where Professor Dent reports to Dr. No and is given the spider to use in killing Bond. The budget was so tight that when the art director, designer Sid Kane, was left out of the credits, they gave him a gold pen and refused to spend money to redo the credits, a contractual issue that would certainly not fly in these days. The world premiere of the film was in London in October of 1962, followed by an extensive European release. In early May of 1963, the film made it to Midwestern and Southwestern theaters in the United States, arriving in New York City and Los Angeles at the end of May. The film earned back its budget and then some in the European market with about $6 million. In the US, the returns were originally a little bit less, but after the success of subsequent films with multiple re-releases, the worldwide totals are in the neighborhood of $60 million. There are a myriad of rabbit holes you can go down in talking about Dr. No. This video essay is certainly not exhaustive, but it's designed to highlight some of the things that I personally care about in the background of the film. I saw this, as I said, as a double feature release, and I have a few memories of that initial exposure. I recall being amused at the high waist of Bond's gray suit when he takes off his jacket in his hotel room. I smiled at the cleverness of the little traps he set in his room to detect if his possessions had been searched in his absence. I remember thinking that Jack Lord's sunglasses were a little too pointed for a man. Now, we lived in Los Angeles at the time, at the very corner of East LA and next to Alhambra and South Pasadena, and I saw this movie at the El Rey Theater on Main Street in Alhambra. Repeated viewings have produced other memories and comments, and I invite you to visit my personal blog, Kirkham a Movie a Day, where I have frequent postings on the 007 films. James Bond and I will return next month with From Russia with Love.